Marcus Chen looked at his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The company holiday party had just started and he already wanted to go home. He stood near the entrance of the Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom, holding a glass of sparkling water and trying to look busy. The room was full of his coworkers, all dressed in their best clothes, talking and laughing in small groups. Marcus was 32 years old and worked as a software engineer at Tech Vision Solutions. He had been with the company for almost 4 years now. He was good at his job, writing code and fixing problems with computer programs, but social events like this made him uncomfortable. He never knew what to say to people when they were not talking about work. The ballroom was decorated with gold and silver ornaments. Tiny white lights hung from the ceiling like stars. Round tables covered with white tablecloths filled most of the space. In the corner of the room near the tall windows that looked out at the city, sat a beautiful black grand piano. Its polished surface reflected the lights from above. Marcus noticed it right away when he walked in. He always noticed pianos. Sarah Martinez, one of his co-workers from the marketing department, walked up to him with a big smile. Sarah was always friendly to everyone. She had worked at the company for 6 years and seemed to know everybody. "Marcus, I'm so glad you came," she said. "I know these parties aren't really your thing." Marcus smiled a little. "Yeah, well, I figured I should show up for at least an hour." "That's the spirit," Sarah laughed. She looked around the room. "It's a nice venue this year, isn't it? Much better than last year's party at that restaurant downtown." Marcus nodded. He remembered last year's party. He had stayed for exactly 45 minutes and then made an excuse about having to get home to feed his cat. He didn't have a cat. They talked for a few more minutes about work projects and the holiday plans. Sarah was going to visit her family in Texas. Marcus said he would probably just stay home and catch up on some reading. He didn't mention that he was also looking forward to having some quiet time alone. More people arrived and the room got louder. The sound of conversations mixed together into a steady hum. Waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd carrying trays of small appetizers. Marcus took a small piece of bruschetta and ate it slowly, making it last as long as possible so he would look occupied. Jennifer Park, the company's director of operations and the person organizing the party, suddenly appeared in the middle of the room looking worried. She was talking quickly on her phone and her face showed stress. Marcus watched as she ended the call and put her hand on her forehead. She looked around the room like she was searching for someone. Jennifer walked quickly to the hotel manager who was standing near the bar. They talked for a minute and both of them looked concerned. Marcus wondered what was wrong, but he didn't want to get involved. He tried to move toward the other side of the room, but Sarah had noticed too. "Something's wrong," she said. "Jennifer looks upset." A few minutes later, Jennifer walked up to the microphone that was set up on a small stage at the front of the room. She tapped it to get everyone's attention. The conversation slowly got quieter. "Hi, everyone," Jennifer said, trying to sound cheerful but not quite managing it. "Welcome to our annual holiday party. I hope you're all having a great time so far." She paused. "I have a small announcement. Our pianist for this evening had to cancel at the last minute due to a family emergency, so we won't have the background music we planned." People in the room made sympathetic sounds. Some said, "Oh no, and that's too bad." Jennifer smiled and said, "It's okay, we'll still have a wonderful evening. Please enjoy the food and drinks." As she stepped away from the microphone, Sarah suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm. He almost spilled his water. "Marcus," she said, her eyes bright with an idea. "You play piano, right? I remember you mentioned it once." Marcus felt his stomach drop. I used to play. A long time ago." "I'm really rusty, Sarah. I haven't seriously played in years." "But you still can, right?" Sarah said. She was already pulling him gently toward Jennifer. "Come on, you could just play some simple songs. It would be so helpful." "Sarah, no, I really don't think." Marcus tried to protest, but Sarah was determined. "Jennifer," Sarah called out. The director of operations turned around. "I found you a pianist." Jennifer's face lit up with hope. She looked at Marcus. "Really? Marcus, you play piano?" Marcus felt his face getting warm. Everyone nearby was now looking at him. I took lessons when I was a kid, and in high school, but I haven't played much since then. I'm not very good anymore." "Oh, that doesn't matter at all," Jennifer said quickly. "We just need some simple background music. Christmas carols, anything really. You would be saving the party, please?" More people were listening now. His boss, David Thompson, walked over. "Marcus plays piano? That's great. I didn't know that about you." Marcus looked at all the faces watching him. He felt trapped. How could he say no now without looking bad? Everyone seemed so hopeful. He could feel his heart beating faster. "I really am very rusty," he said one more time, trying to make them understand. "That's totally fine," Jennifer assured him. "Honestly, just play whatever you're comfortable with. Even if you just play a few songs, it would be wonderful." Sarah gave him an encouraging smile. "You can do it, Marcus. It'll be fun." Marcus took a deep breath. He looked over at the grand piano sitting in the corner. It had been so long since he had played on a real piano like that. At home, he had a small keyboard that he almost never used. It was pushed against the wall in his spare bedroom, covered with a sheet. "Okay," he finally said. "I'll try, but don't expect too much." People actually clapped. Marcus felt even more nervous. Jennifer thanked him several times and said he was a hero for helping out. She led him toward the piano. As they walked across the room, Marcus's mind raced. What should he play? He tried to remember what songs he knew. Christmas carols, Jennifer had mentioned. He knew Silent Night pretty well. And Jingle Bells was easy. Maybe the first Noel. Those were simple enough. The piano stood on a slightly raised area near the windows. It was even more beautiful up close. The wood was perfectly polished. Marcus could see his reflection in it. He sat down on the bench and adjusted it to the right height. The familiar action brought back memories. He had spent so many hours sitting on piano benches when he was younger. He lifted the lid that covered the keys. They were bright white and black, perfectly clean. He touched one key gently. The sound was clear and rich. This was a very good piano, probably very expensive. His hands felt sweaty. A small crowd had gathered to watch him start. Marcus wished they would go away and do something else. He tried to ignore them. He put his hands on the keys, feeling their smooth surface under his fingers. His mind went blank for a second. What was he going to play again? Oh yes, Silent Night, he knew that one. He had played it hundreds of times as a kid during Christmas recitals. Marcus pressed the first few notes. They came out softer than he meant them to. He pressed a little harder. The melody started to form. His fingers remembered the pattern even though his brain felt fuzzy. It was strange how muscle memory worked. His hands knew what to do even when he felt nervous. He made a few small mistakes in the first verse, hitting wrong notes here and there, but he kept going. The song was slow and gentle. As he played, he started to relax just a little bit. The room around him seemed to fade away. It was just him and the piano and the music. People started to move away from the piano, going back to their conversations and their food. This was what Marcus wanted. He was just background music now. He could handle that. He finished Silent Night and moved right into Jingle Bells. This one was more upbeat and cheerful. His fingers moved a little faster. He remembered playing this song when he was maybe 10 years old. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had assigned it to him for the winter recital. She had made him practice it over and over until it was perfect. The memories kept coming as he played. He remembered the smell of Mrs. Patterson's house like old books and vanilla candles. He remembered the old upright piano in her living room with the sticky middle C key. He remembered being scared before recitals, his hands shaking so much he thought he would mess everything up. But he had loved it too. He had loved the feeling when he played something perfectly, when all the notes came together just right. He had loved learning new pieces and figuring out the difficult parts. Music had been a big part of his life for so many years. Marcus played through several more Christmas songs. The first Noel, Deck the Halls. What child is this? His fingers started to remember things he thought he had forgotten. Little runs and ornamentations that made the songs more interesting. He added them without really thinking about it. The party continued around him. People talked and laughed. Waiters brought out plates of food. Someone made a toast. Marcus barely noticed. He was in his own world now, focused on the music. He started to feel more confident. His fingers were warming up, becoming more flexible. The nervousness was fading away. This wasn't so bad after all. Actually, it felt kind of nice to play again. He had forgotten how much he enjoyed it. After about 20 minutes, Marcus decided to try something a little different. He was getting bored with Christmas carols. He started playing Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, one of the first classical pieces he had ever learned. It was slow and beautiful and a little bit sad. His hands moved across the keys with more certainty now. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music flow through him. This was the piece that had made him fall in love with classical music. He was 14 when he first heard it, and something about it had touched his heart. He didn't notice that someone was watching him from across the room. An older woman with silver hair, wearing an elegant dark blue dress, had stopped in the middle of her conversation. She was listening to him play, her head tilted slightly to the side. Her eyes were focused on his hands, watching how they moved across the keys. Marcus finished the first movement of the sonata and paused for a moment. He flexed his fingers. They were getting a little tired. Maybe he should take a break. He had been playing for almost 30 minutes now. That was probably enough, but before he could stand up, he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up and saw the older woman walking toward the piano. She had a gentle smile on her face. Marcus didn't recognize her. She wasn't one of his co-workers. "That was lovely," she said. Her voice was warm and kind. "Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. You play it with real feeling." "Thank you," Marcus said, feeling a little embarrassed. "I'm pretty rusty, though. I made a few mistakes." "Every pianist makes mistakes," the woman said. "What matters is the emotion behind the notes." She looked at the piano with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. It was like she was looking at an old friend she hadn't seen in a long time. "Do you play?" Marcus asked politely. The woman's smile grew a little wider. "I used to, many years ago." There was something in the way she said it that made Marcus curious. But before he could ask anything else, Jennifer appeared again, thanking him for his wonderful playing and asking if he would mind continuing for a little while longer. Marcus agreed, and the older woman stepped back. But she didn't walk away. She stood a few feet from the piano, still watching, still listening. Marcus wondered who she was. He started playing again, choosing a simple arrangement of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." But he could feel the woman's eyes on him, and for some reason, it made him want to play better. He put more care into each note, paid more attention to the dynamics, made the music more expressive. And the woman kept watching, her expression growing more thoughtful with each passing moment, as if she was making a decision about something important. Marcus finished the song and let the last notes fade into silence. He was about to start another Christmas carol when the older woman stepped closer to the piano. She had been standing there for several minutes now, just watching and listening. Up close, Marcus could see that she was probably in her mid-60s. She had silver hair pulled back in an elegant style, and her eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue. There was something distinguished about her, something that suggested she was used to important places and refined settings. "Would you mind if I played something?" she asked. Her voice was gentle, but there was confidence underneath it. Marcus was surprised by the request. "Oh, of course not," he said quickly, standing up from the bench. "Please go ahead." "Thank you," the woman said. She sat down at the piano with a grace that suggested she had done this many times before. She adjusted the bench with small, precise movements. Then she placed her hands on the keys in a way that made Marcus pause. Her posture, the curve of her fingers, the way she held her wrists, it all looked professional. Very professional. This was not someone who used to play a little bit. This was someone who had trained seriously. The woman began to play, and Marcus's eyes widened. She started with a piece by Chopin, one of his nocturnes. The music that came from the piano was completely different from anything Marcus had been playing. It was richer, more complex, more alive. Her fingers moved with incredible precision and grace. The melody soared and dipped, filling the ballroom with beautiful sound. People in the room started to notice. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the piano. Even people who had been ignoring Marcus's playing were now paying attention. The music was impossible to ignore. Marcus stood beside the piano, listening with his mouth slightly open. This woman was amazing. She played with the kind of skill that came from years and years of serious training, maybe even professional experience. Every note was perfect. The emotion in the music was deep and genuine. She wasn't just playing the notes on the page, she was telling a story. The Chopin piece ended, and the room was silent for a moment before people started clapping. The woman smiled and nodded graciously, but she didn't stand up. Instead, she looked up at Marcus with a twinkle in her eye. "You're very talented," Marcus said. "That was incredible." "Thank you," she replied. "You have a nice touch yourself." "Self-taught?" "No, I had lessons for many years," Marcus said. "But I stopped playing seriously after high school. That was, well, a long time ago. The woman nodded thoughtfully. She played a few soft chords like she was thinking about something. Then she played a simple melody, something that sounded jazzy and fun. It was a musical question, almost like she was saying, "Can you do this?" in notes instead of words. Marcus wasn't sure what she was doing at first, but then he understood. She was inviting him to play with her, to have a conversation in music. His heart started beating faster. "I don't know if I can," he began. "Just try," she said, her smile encouraging. There's no wrong answer in improvisation. Improvisation. That was something Marcus had barely touched. His piano lessons had been classical, focused on playing written music correctly. He had never been good at making things up on the spot. But something about the way this woman looked at him, the way she had played that simple little melody with such joy, made him want to try. He sat down on the bench beside her. There was just enough room for both of them. He listened to what she was playing, trying to understand the pattern. She was using a simple chord progression, something in the key of C major. She nodded at him, encouraging him to join in. Marcus put his hands on the higher keys and played a simple response to her melody. It was basic, just a few notes that seemed to fit with what she was doing. He half expected it to sound terrible, but it didn't. It sounded okay. Not great, but okay. The woman's smile grew wider. She played her melody again, but this time she changed it slightly, adding a little twist at the end. It was like she was saying, "Your turn again." Marcus tried to respond. He played something a little more complex this time. A few more notes, a small run up the scale. His fingers stumbled a bit, but he got through it. Some people in the party had stopped to watch them. Sarah was in the crowd, her eyes wide with surprise. Jennifer stood next to her, looking amazed. Marcus tried not to think about them watching. He focused on the piano, on the music, on what this woman was doing. The woman changed the key, moving into something more minor and moody. Marcus followed as best as he could. His musical theory knowledge was rusty, but he remembered enough to find the right notes. She was making this easier for him somehow, choosing progressions that were simple enough for him to follow, but interesting enough to sound good. They went back and forth like this for a few minutes, trading simple musical phrases. It was awkward at times. Marcus made mistakes, hit wrong notes, lost the rhythm, but the woman never seemed bothered by it. She just kept playing, kept encouraging him with her eyes and her smile. Then something started to change. Marcus began to feel more comfortable. His fingers started to remember things he thought he had forgotten. Little techniques he had learned years ago started coming back. He found himself adding small ornamentations to his melodies, little trills and grace notes that made them more interesting. The woman noticed. Her eyes lit up. She responded by playing something more challenging, a faster run with more notes. It was still friendly, still encouraging, but there was a hint of challenge in it too. Like she was saying, "I see you can do more. Show me." Marcus felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a very long time. It was excitement mixed with nervousness, the feeling of being pushed to do something difficult but wanting to rise to the challenge. He took a breath and played a response that was faster and more complex than anything he had played so far. His fingers flew across the keys, and somehow they hit the right notes. The woman laughed with delight. Not a mocking laugh, but a genuine sound of pleasure. She was enjoying this. The crowd around the piano grew larger. More people were watching now, sensing that something unusual was happening. Marcus could hear whispered conversations. "Who is that woman? I've never seen her before. Is that really Marcus playing like that?" The woman shifted the music again, this time into something with a Latin rhythm. Marcus recognized it vaguely. It reminded him of something he had heard in a movie soundtrack. She played the bass line with her left hand, strong and rhythmic, while her right hand danced over the melody. Marcus tried to match her energy. He played counter melodies in the higher register, trying to complement what she was doing rather than compete with it. He made mistakes, several of them, but he didn't stop. He kept going, and somehow the mistakes didn't matter as much as he thought they would. They played together for what felt like both seconds and hours. Time became strange. Marcus was completely focused on the music, on listening to what she played and responding to it. His usual anxiety about performing was gone, replaced by something else. Concentration, creativity, joy. The woman played a phrase that sounded almost like a question, ending on a note that hung in the air unresolved. She looked at Marcus, waiting. He understood what she wanted. She wanted him to answer, to complete the musical sentence. He thought for just a moment, then played a phrase that resolved the chord that gave the answer to her question. It felt right. She smiled and nodded, then played something new. This time it was more bluesy, with bent notes and unexpected harmonies. Marcus loved the blues but had never learned to play it properly. He tried to follow, doing his best to imitate the style. It was rough and imperfect, but there was feeling in it. A waiter tried to walk past with a tray of drinks but stopped, distracted by the music. Several people had their phones out now, recording. Marcus didn't notice. He was too absorbed in what he was doing. The woman increased the tempo gradually, making the music more energetic. Her fingers moved faster, playing complex passages that showed years of training. Marcus struggled to keep up, but he tried. He simplified his parts, playing sparser melodies that didn't require as much speed. But he stayed with her, following the musical journey she was creating. Then she did something unexpected. She played a quick, playful little riff, just 5 or 6 notes, that sounded almost cheeky. It was like a musical wink. And in that moment, Marcus realized what was happening. This wasn't just a friendly improvisation anymore. This was becoming a challenge. A friendly challenge, yes, good-natured and fun, but a challenge nonetheless. She was testing him, seeing how far he could go, how much he could do. Something competitive stirred in Marcus. He had always been the type to back down from challenges, especially in social situations. He preferred to stay in the background to avoid attention. But sitting at this piano with this skilled stranger beside him, something different woke up inside him. He remembered being 16 years old, in the final round of a regional piano competition. He remembered the thrill of performing difficult music well. He remembered wanting to be the best, to prove himself. That feeling had been buried for so many years, covered up by practical choices and safe decisions. But it wasn't gone. It was still there, waiting. Marcus grinned, actually grinned, and played his own playful riff in response to hers. It was faster than hers, a little bit showier. He even managed to throw in a small flourish at the end. The woman's eyebrows went up in surprise and pleasure. She laughed again, that delighted sound. "Oh, you want to play like that?" Her expression seemed to say. She answered him with a cascade of notes that tumbled down the piano like water falling. It was beautiful and technically impressive. The crowd gasped. Even Marcus was impressed. This woman was seriously good. But instead of feeling intimidated, Marcus felt energized. He waited for her to finish her flourish, then played his own cascade going back up the piano. It wasn't as perfect as hers. He fumbled a couple of notes in the middle, but he finished strong. The music was getting louder now, more intense. They were both using more of the piano, their hands sometimes nearly colliding as they reached for different keys. The sound filled the ballroom completely. Every conversation had stopped. Everyone was watching the piano. Sarah stood in the crowd with her hand over her mouth, looking shocked. She had known Marcus for years, had worked with him on dozens of projects. She had never imagined he could do anything like this. The Marcus she knew was quiet, reserved, almost invisible at social events. This Marcus at the piano, playing with increasing confidence and even flair, was someone completely different. The woman played a series of jazz chords, rich and complex. Marcus recognized some of them from music theory class so many years ago. Dominant sevenths, diminished chords, augmented fifths. She was moving through a progression that kept changing key, making it harder to follow. Marcus concentrated hard, listening carefully to find his place in the harmonic structure. He played simpler chords to support what she was doing, trying to be helpful rather than interfering. Then, when she left him space, he played a melody line that wove through her chords like a thread through fabric. It worked. It actually worked. They were making real music together. Two people who had never met before, communicating through sound and rhythm. The woman glanced at Marcus and he saw respect in her eyes. She had expected him to give up by now, probably. To say it was too hard to let her finish alone. But he was still here, still playing, still trying. She modulated to a new key, F major, and slowed the tempo down. The music became softer, gentler. It was like she was giving him a moment to breathe. Marcus felt grateful for it. His hands were starting to get tired, and his mind was working overtime trying to keep up with everything she was doing. They played more quietly for a minute or two, creating something peaceful and pretty. Marcus relaxed a little bit. This was nice. This was manageable. But then he saw a small smile cross her face and he knew what was coming. She was just letting him rest before the next challenge. This wasn't over yet. Not even close. The woman's fingers suddenly pressed down with new energy. The soft, gentle music disappeared, replaced by a driving rhythm that pulsed with life. She was playing something that reminded Marcus of ragtime music, the kind that piano players performed in old saloons. Her left hand kept a steady, bouncing bass line while her right hand danced across the melody, playing notes that jumped and skipped with joyful energy. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was another level entirely. She was showing him what she could really do. He listened carefully, trying to find a way to join in without getting in her way. The rhythm was tricky, with accents in unexpected places, but he found the pattern after a few measures and started adding complementary notes in the upper register. The crowd around the piano had grown even larger. People from other parts of the ballroom were coming over to see what all the excitement was about. Someone had started timing the performance. 10 minutes had passed, then 12, then 15. The music showed no sign of stopping. David Thompson, Marcus's boss, stood near the front of the crowd with an expression of complete disbelief on his face. He had worked with Marcus for almost 4 years, and had never known this side of him existed. The quiet programmer who barely spoke in meetings was playing a piano like his life depended on it, keeping pace with a woman who was clearly an expert. The woman shifted styles again, moving into something that sounded almost like a tango. The music became sultry and dramatic. She played with a kind of passionate intensity that made Marcus's simple improvisation from earlier look like child's play. Her whole body moved with the music, swaying slightly with the rhythm. Marcus tried to match her mood. He played darker chords in the mid-range of the piano, adding tension to the music. Then, during a brief pause in her melody, he threw in a quick ascending run that added excitement. It was risky. He wasn't sure if it would fit, but it worked. The woman's eyes flashed with approval. She responded by playing an even more dramatic phrase, her hands crossing over each other to reach the keys she wanted. The sound was powerful and emotional, filling every corner of the room. Marcus was sweating now. He could feel dampness on his forehead and on his palms. His fingers were starting to feel the strain of playing continuously for so long. Normally he would have stopped by now, taken a break, rested, but stopping felt impossible. The music had momentum, a life of its own, and it was carrying both of them forward. He played a response to her tango phrase, trying to be as dramatic as she was. He hit the keys harder than he normally would, making the notes ring out strongly. Some part of his brain was worried about making mistakes, about looking foolish in front of all these people. But a bigger part of him, a part he had forgotten existed, didn't care. That part just wanted to play, to create, to express something that words couldn't capture. The woman ended the tango section with a flourish and immediately jumped into something new. This time it was classical, a piece that sounded like Bach or maybe Handel. The melody was intricate and precise, with lots of notes moving very quickly. It required serious technical skill. Marcus knew immediately that he couldn't match this. His classical technique was too rusty. He would mess it up for sure if he tried to play something similar, so he made a different choice. While she played her Bach-like melody, he added simple, supportive harmony underneath it. Just clean chords in the bass, giving her something to build on. It wasn't flashy or impressive, but it worked. Sometimes the best thing you could do in music was know when to step back and let someone else shine. Marcus understood this instinctively. He played his supporting role with care, making sure his chords were accurate and well-timed. The woman seemed to appreciate this. She let the classical passage sing out, her fingers moving with absolute precision. Every note was crystal clear. Every trill was perfectly executed. It was the kind of playing that comes only from many years of dedicated practice. When she finished that section, she slowed down and let the music become quieter again. Both of them were breathing hard now. Marcus's hands actually hurt. His fingers felt stiff and tired. He wondered if she was feeling the same thing. She was older than him, after all. This had to be physically demanding for her, too. But if she was tired, she didn't show it. She played a gentle, pretty melody in a major key. It reminded Marcus of a lullaby or a folk song, something simple and heartfelt. He added soft accompaniment, playing sustained chords that supported the melody without overwhelming it. For a minute or two, the music was peaceful. The crowd seemed to relax a little bit, sensing the change in mood. Some people started whispering to each other again, though they kept their voices low so they wouldn't disturb the performance. "Who is that woman?" someone asked. "She must be a professional pianist," another person said, "and Marcus, I had no idea he could play like that." Jennifer, the director of operations, was recording everything on her phone. She was thinking about how she could use this for the company's social media. This was amazing content, unexpected and genuine and captivating. Marcus let his mind drift for a moment as they played the gentle melody. He thought about why he had stopped playing piano seriously. It had been a practical decision. He had been accepted to Juilliard, the famous music school in New York. His piano teacher had been so proud. She had cried when she told him about the acceptance letter. But Marcus's parents had been worried. Music was a difficult career, they said. So few musicians made enough money to live comfortably, and Marcus was so good at math and science. Wouldn't it be smarter to study something more practical, like computer science or engineering? They had found him a full scholarship at a good university for computer science. Complete tuition, room and board, everything covered. How could he turn that down? How could he ask his parents to pay for music school when he had a free ride to study computers? So he had chosen the practical path. He told himself he could still play piano as a hobby, but somehow over the years he had played less and less. Life got busy. Work took up all his time. The piano gathered dust until tonight. The woman's playing brought him back to the present moment. She was building up the intensity again, gradually increasing the volume and complexity. The lullaby melody transformed into something more urgent. She was signaling that the gentle interlude was over. It was time to raise the stakes again. Marcus shook off his thoughts and focused. He was here now in this moment, and that was all that mattered. He responded to her rising intensity by adding more notes to his part, making his accompaniment busier and more energetic. They pushed each other higher and higher. The music got louder and faster. Both of them were using more of the piano now, their hands ranging across all the keys. Sometimes Marcus's right hand and the woman's left hand nearly collided in the middle of the keyboard. They had to coordinate carefully to avoid actually hitting each other. The woman played a series of powerful chords that sounded almost like thunder. Marcus felt the vibrations through the piano bench. He answered with his own chords, trying to match her power. His arms were tired, but he hit the keys with as much force as he could manage. Then she did something that surprised him. She started playing a bebop jazz riff, the kind that jazz pianists improvised in small clubs. It was fast and unpredictable, with notes that jumped all over the place. The rhythm was complex, with lots of syncopation. This was expert-level jazz playing. Marcus loved jazz but had never learned to play it properly. His lessons had focused on classical music. He knew the theory behind jazz, knew about the chord progressions and the scales, but actually improvising in that style was something else entirely. He listened hard, trying to understand what she was doing. The riff was built on a blues scale, he realized, and she was using a walking bass line in her left hand, the kind that moved steadily through the chord changes. He could work with that. Marcus started playing his own jazz-influenced phrases. They weren't as sophisticated as hers, not even close, but they had feeling. He let his fingers explore the blues scale, finding notes that sounded right to his ear even if he couldn't have explained theoretically why they worked. The woman heard what he was doing and adapted to it. She started leaving him more space, giving him room to try his own improvisations. When he played something good, she would quote it back to him, incorporating his ideas into her own playing. It was generous and collaborative, even in the middle of what was clearly becoming a competitive display. Marcus tried something risky. He attempted a fast run down the blues scale, the kind of thing he had heard jazz pianists do in recordings. His fingers stumbled partway through, hitting a wrong note, but he kept going and finished the phrase strongly. The woman smiled. She seemed to respect the attempt even though it wasn't perfect. She played her own run, showing him how it should be done, but she did it in a way that felt encouraging rather than showing off. Back and forth they went, trading jazz phrases, pushing the boundaries of what Marcus thought he could do. His fingers were finding things he didn't know they remembered. His ears were hearing harmonies and melodies that surprised him. It was like there was a part of his brain that had been asleep for years, and it was finally waking up. The crowd was completely silent now, except for the occasional gasp when one of the pianists did something particularly impressive. People were filming on their phones, but they held them steady and quiet. No one wanted to miss a second of this. Sarah was crying. Actual tears ran down her face as she watched Marcus play. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. This was like discovering that your quiet neighbor was secretly a superhero. Marcus, who barely talked at company meetings, who always ate lunch alone, who seemed to fade into the background. This same Marcus was creating beautiful, complex music with a stranger, in front of 100 people, without hesitation or fear. The music reached a new peak of intensity. Both pianists were playing as loudly and energetically as they could. The sound was almost overwhelming. It filled the ballroom and spilled out into the hotel hallways. Hotel staff members peeked through the doorways, curious about the noise. Marcus's hands were shaking with effort, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The music was carrying him along like a river current. All he could do was try to stay afloat and keep playing. The woman threw down a challenging phrase, a fast, intricate passage that showed off her technical skill. It was like she was saying, "Can you do this?" Marcus knew he couldn't match it exactly, but he could respond in his own way. He played a different kind of passage, one that was less about speed and more about power. He hit a series of strong, decisive chords that rang out like a statement. It was his way of saying, "Maybe I can't do exactly what you do, but I can do this." She understood. He could see it in her eyes. There was respect there, and something else too. Pride, maybe, like she was proud of him for holding his own, for not giving up. They continued to battle musically, neither one willing to back down. But it was a friendly battle full of mutual appreciation. They were pushing each other to be better, to reach higher, to find abilities they didn't know they had. 20 minutes had passed. Then 25. People were checking the time in disbelief. How were they still playing? Most piano performances lasted maybe 5 or 10 minutes at most. But this kept going and going. Marcus didn't know how much longer he could continue. His fingers hurt badly now. His back was starting to ache from leaning forward for so long. His mind was getting fuzzy from the concentration required to keep up with the woman's playing. But stopping seemed impossible. The music had a momentum that felt bigger than both of them. It was like they had started something that needed to be finished, a story that needed its proper ending. The woman seemed to sense this too. She began to steer the music toward what felt like a conclusion. She played a phrase that sounded final, like the last line of a chapter. Marcus understood and prepared himself for whatever came next. The woman began playing a melody that Marcus recognized immediately. It was from a piece by Rachmaninoff, one of the most emotional and beautiful composers who ever lived. The melody was slow and achingly lovely, full of longing and sadness and hope all mixed together. She played it with such feeling that several people in the crowd felt tears spring to their eyes. Marcus listened, moved by what he was hearing. This wasn't about showing off anymore. This was about sharing something real and true through music. The woman was opening up, letting everyone see into her heart through the notes she played. He wanted to respond in kind. He wanted to share something equally personal and meaningful. But what could he play that would match the depth of what she was giving? Then he remembered a piece he had written himself when he was 17 years old. It had never been performed in public. He had been too shy to share it with anyone except his piano teacher. It was a simple composition, not very sophisticated, but it meant something to him. It was about feeling lost and trying to find your way home. Marcus began to play his old melody, weaving it in underneath the Rachmaninoff that the woman was still performing. The two melodies intertwined, creating something new and unexpected. His simple composition and her complex classical piece shouldn't have worked together, but somehow they did. The woman heard what he was doing and adjusted her playing to accommodate his melody. She softened her volume, gave him space, let his notes sing out. She improvised variations on the Rachmaninoff to make it fit better with what Marcus was playing. They were creating something together now, not competing. A true collaboration. The music became intensely emotional. Marcus found himself pouring feelings into the piano that he normally kept buried deep inside. Feelings about the career he had given up, about the dreams he had abandoned, about all the years he had spent doing the practical thing instead of the thing that made his heart sing. As he played, something inside him started to shift. It was like a knot that had been tied for years was finally loosening. He realized how much he had missed this, how much of himself he had locked away when he stopped making music. The woman seemed to be going through something similar. Her playing had changed too. It wasn't just technically perfect anymore. It was raw and vulnerable. She was remembering something, feeling something from her own past. Her fingers moved across the keys with a kind of desperate beauty, like she was trying to recapture something precious that had been lost. They played together like this, creating a duet that neither of them had planned or rehearsed. Marcus's simple melody and her classical expertise merged into something that was greater than either part alone. The music swelled and grew, becoming richer and more complex. The entire room was spellbound. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the people who didn't particularly like classical music or piano performances found themselves completely absorbed in what they were hearing. There was something magical happening, something rare and special that couldn't be predicted or manufactured. Jennifer stood with her phone in her hand, but she had stopped recording. She was just watching now, caught up in the moment like everyone else. Tears were streaming down her face, though she didn't notice them. Sarah was gripping the arm of the person next to her, a coworker named Tom from accounting. Neither of them looked away from the piano. Tom, who usually left these parties early and complained about having to attend, was frozen in place, his mouth slightly open in wonder. The music built to an emotional peak. Both pianists were giving everything they had. Marcus's hands were in serious pain now, but he played through it. The woman's face showed strain too, lines of effort around her eyes and mouth, but neither of them would stop. Then the woman played a phrase that sounded like a question, a musical question hanging in the air, waiting for an answer. She looked at Marcus and he understood what she was asking. She was ready to end this, to bring it to a conclusion, but she wanted to do it together. She was asking if he was ready too. Marcus nodded slightly. Yes, he was ready. He played a phrase that responded to her question, that began to resolve the musical tension they had built up. The woman added her own resolution, harmonizing with what he was playing. Together they began to guide the music toward its ending. They slowed the tempo gradually, letting the intensity fade like the sun setting at the end of the day. The complex improvisation simplified, becoming more straightforward. Both of them were thinking about the same thing now: how to create an ending that felt right, that honored everything they had played before. Marcus remembered a technique his old teacher had shown him, about how to create a perfect ending to a piece. You needed to signal that the end was coming, give the listener a chance to prepare for it. Then you needed to find the right final chord, the one that would make everything feel complete. He and the woman moved together through a series of chords that gradually brought them back to the key where they had started all those minutes ago. C major, simple and pure. They played more quietly now, the volume dropping until it was just barely above a whisper. The room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew the end was near. Everyone waited. The woman played a gentle arpeggio, the notes cascading softly like water trickling over stones. Marcus added a high bell-like note that rang out clearly in the silence. Then another note, lower this time. They were creating the final phrases together, each adding pieces to the puzzle. Marcus looked at the woman and she looked back at him. Without speaking, without any rehearsal or planning, they both knew what to do. They both reached for the same final chord at the same moment. Their hands were inches apart on the keyboard. Marcus's right hand and the woman's left hand played the upper notes of the chord. Marcus's left hand and the woman's right hand played the lower notes, 4 hands working as one to create a single perfect sound. The chord rang out into the ballroom. It was a C major chord, simple and beautiful and complete. The sound hung in the air for a long moment. Both pianists held their hands on the keys, sustaining the note, letting it resonate through the piano and through the room and through everyone listening. Then slowly they lifted their hands away from the keys. The sound faded gradually, getting softer and softer until finally it disappeared into silence. No one moved for a few seconds. The silence was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop. Marcus and the woman sat side by side on the piano bench, both breathing heavily, both exhausted, both overwhelmed by what had just happened. Then the room exploded with sound. People started clapping and cheering and shouting. The applause was thunderous, echoing off the walls and ceiling of the ballroom. People were on their feet, giving a standing ovation. Some were wiping tears from their eyes as they clapped. Marcus sat there in shock, unable to quite process what was happening. His hands were trembling with exhaustion. His shirt was damp with sweat. His mind felt fuzzy and distant. Had that really just happened? Had he really just played piano for how long had it been? With a complete stranger in front of all these people, the woman turned to him with a huge smile on her face. Her eyes were bright, alive in a way that made her look 20 years younger. She extended her hand to him. That was wonderful. she said, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. Thank you for that. Marcus shook her hand, feeling the warmth of her grip. Thank you, he managed to say. You were incredible. I'm sorry I couldn't keep up better. Keep up? The woman laughed, a joyful sound. You did beautifully. That piece you played near the end, the one you composed yourself, it was lovely. Really lovely. Marcus felt his face flush with pleasure and embarrassment. She had recognized that it was his own composition. Somehow that meant even more than all the applause. They both stood up from the piano bench, and the woman did something unexpected. She pulled Marcus into a hug. It was a warm, genuine embrace, the kind you might give to an old friend you hadn't seen in years. I needed that, she whispered in his ear. More than you know. Marcus hugged her back, not sure what to say. He felt the same way, but the words wouldn't come. When they separated, people crowded around them. Everyone wanted to talk to them, to congratulate them, to ask questions. How long had they been practicing together? How did they know each other? Were they going to perform again? We just met, the woman explained, laughing at people's surprised faces. Tonight, about an hour ago. You're kidding, someone said. That was completely improvised? Completely, Marcus confirmed, still hardly believing it himself. Sarah pushed through the crowd and grabbed Marcus in a tight hug. I can't believe you, she said. All these years and you never told me you could play like that. I didn't know I still could, Marcus said honestly. I haven't played seriously in so long. Well, you need to start again, Sarah said firmly. That was amazing. I recorded some of it, I hope that's okay. Other people were showing their phones, all displaying videos they had taken. Marcus realized this whole thing had been documented. The thought made him a little nervous, but mostly he just felt tired and happy and dazed. Jennifer came over to thank them both profusely. This is going to be the talk of the company for months, she said. Thank you so much for making this party so special. David Thompson, Marcus's boss, shook his hand with a look of newfound respect. I had no idea you had talents like this, Marcus. Really impressive. People kept coming up to them, and the woman handled all the attention with grace and warmth. She answered questions and accepted compliments with the ease of someone who was used to being in the spotlight. Marcus tried to follow her example, but he felt awkward and overwhelmed. After a while, the crowd started to thin out a bit as people returned to the party. Though many kept glancing back at the piano as if they hoped the performance might start again. Marcus finally had a chance to really talk to the woman. I don't even know your name, he said with a small laugh. Eleanor, she said, extending her hand again formally. Eleanor Rodriguez. Marcus Chen, he replied, shaking her hand. It's an honor to meet you. You're clearly a professional pianist. Eleanor's smile became a bit sad. I was, a long time ago. I haven't played seriously in many years. But you're so good, Marcus said. Why did you stop? Eleanor looked at the piano, her expression thoughtful. Life happens. Choices have to be made. I had a family to raise. A husband whose career required us to move frequently. Playing professionally didn't fit with that life. Marcus felt a shock of recognition. Her story sounded so much like his own, just with different details. I understand, he said quietly. I was supposed to go to Juilliard, but I took a scholarship for computer science instead. Eleanor looked at him with knowing eyes. The practical choice. The practical choice, Marcus agreed. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who had made similar sacrifices, who understood what it meant to put away a dream. The party continued around them, but Marcus and Eleanor stood near the piano talking. They discovered more connections between their stories. Eleanor had grown up in New York, studying at a prestigious music conservatory. She had performed in concert halls and won competitions. Everyone said she was on track to have a brilliant career as a concert pianist. I was scheduled to perform at Carnegie Hall, Eleanor said, her voice quiet, a debut recital. I was 24 years old and it was my dream coming true. What happened? Marcus asked. I met my husband 2 months before the performance, Eleanor said with a small smile. Roberto. He was in New York for business. We fell in love fast, too fast probably. He lived in California and was about to move to London for his job. He asked me to come with him. She paused, looking at her hands. I could have said no. I could have stayed and done the Carnegie Hall performance. But I was young and in love, and I thought I could have both. I thought I could build a concert career while moving around the world with him. But you couldn't, Marcus said gently. No, It turns out concert pianists need to stay in one place. They need to build relationships with orchestras and venues. They need to practice with the same piano, work with the same coaches. I tried for a few years, but it was impossible. Then we had children, 3 beautiful children, and my focus had to shift completely. Eleanor smiled, but there was sadness in it. I don't regret my family, not for a second. Roberto is wonderful, and my children are the lights of my life. But sometimes I wonder who I might have been if I had made different choices. Marcus understood that feeling completely. I think about that too, he said. What if I had gone to Juilliard? What if I had tried to be a professional musician? Why didn't you? Eleanor asked. Marcus tried to put his reasoning into words. My parents were immigrants. They worked so hard to give me opportunities. They couldn't understand why I would choose something as uncertain as music when I had a free education in computer science. And honestly, I was scared. Music felt too risky. What if I failed? And now? Eleanor asked. Do you regret your choice? Marcus thought about it. Yes and no. I'm good at my job. I make a decent living. I have a comfortable life. But there's something missing. Tonight, playing with you, I felt more alive than I've felt in years. Eleanor nodded slowly. I know exactly what you mean. They were interrupted by a woman who looked to be in her 30s, approaching them with a big smile. She had the same gray-blue eyes as Eleanor. Mom, the woman said, hugging Eleanor. That was incredible. I had no idea you could still play like that. Christina, Eleanor said warmly. This is Marcus Chen. Marcus, this is my daughter, Christina Rodriguez. Marcus shook Christina's hand, suddenly understanding. Wait, Rodriguez. Are you related to Roberto Rodriguez, the CEO of TechVision? Christina laughed. He's my father. This is my dad's company. I work here too, in the legal department. Mom came to the party with us tonight. I didn't want to come, Eleanor admitted. I thought it would be boring. Shows what I know. Christina was still smiling at her mother with obvious pride. Dad is going to be so upset he missed this. He's at a conference in Seattle. He won't believe it when I tell him. More family members came over. Eleanor's son, Miguel, and her youngest daughter, Sophia. They all hugged their mother and congratulated her. They seemed amazed and delighted by what they had witnessed. Marcus got the impression that Eleanor rarely played piano anymore, even at home. As the family talked and laughed together, Marcus started to feel like an outsider. He began to excuse himself, but Eleanor stopped him. Wait, she said. Before you go, can I have your contact information? I'd like to stay in touch. Marcus was surprised but pleased. Of course. They exchanged phone numbers and email addresses. Maybe we could play together again sometime, Eleanor suggested. If you'd like to. I would love that, Marcus said sincerely. As he walked away from the piano, Sarah caught up with him. She linked her arm through his and squeezed. You're full of surprises, Marcus Chen, she said. I surprised myself tonight, Marcus admitted. The party went on for another hour, but Marcus left early. He needed time alone to process everything that had happened. As he drove home through the quiet city streets, his mind kept replaying the performance. The feeling of his fingers on the keys. The way Eleanor had challenged him and encouraged him at the same time. The pure joy of making music with another person. When he got home to his small apartment, the first thing he did was walk to his spare bedroom. He pulled the sheet off his keyboard and wiped away the dust. He sat down and started to play, just simple scales and exercises at first. His fingers hurt from the intense performance earlier, but he didn't care. He played for an hour, then 2. He pulled out old sheet music he hadn't looked at in a decade. Some of it was too difficult for him now, but he tried anyway. He made mistakes and laughed at himself and kept going. It was 2 in the morning when he finally stopped. His hands were sore and he was exhausted, but he felt good, really good. The next few days were strange. The video of his performance with Eleanor had spread beyond the company. Someone had posted it on social media with a caption that said, "Unexpected piano duel at corporate holiday party." It got hundreds of shares, then thousands. News websites picked it up. Local TV stations wanted to interview them. The headline was always some variation of, "Two strangers create magical musical moment" or "Corporate party gets unexpected concert." Marcus didn't know how to handle the attention. He declined most of the interview requests. But Eleanor agreed to talk to a few reporters, and she always made sure to mention Marcus and praise his playing. One article in the local arts magazine particularly caught his attention. The journalist had done some research on Eleanor and discovered her background as a concert pianist. The article talked about her early career, the performances she had given, the potential she had shown. It quoted one of her former teachers saying that Eleanor Rodriguez had been one of the most gifted pianists of her generation. Reading that made Marcus feel honored to have played with her. It also made him sad for her, for the career that never fully happened. A week after the party, Eleanor called him. "How would you feel about playing together again?" she asked. "There's a small charity event next month. They're looking for performers, and I thought maybe we could do something." Marcus's first instinct was to say no. He wasn't a performer. He was a software engineer who happened to play piano as a hobby. But then he remembered how he had felt at the holiday party, how alive and present and real he had felt while making music. "Yes," he heard himself say, "I'd like that." They met at a music studio to practice together. It was awkward at first, without the spontaneous energy of the holiday party, without the crowd and the adrenaline. It felt different. They struggled to recapture the magic. "This isn't working," Marcus said after an hour of frustrating practice. "Maybe we should just forget it." Eleanor shook her head. "We're trying too hard to recreate what happened before. That was special because it was spontaneous. We need to find something new." She suggested they start with simple improvisations again, the way they had begun at the party. Just playing around, having fun, not worrying about mistakes or perfection. It took time, but gradually they found their rhythm again. They discovered that they worked well together when they stopped trying to impress each other and just focused on listening and responding. Their styles were different, Eleanor's classical training and Marcus's more eclectic background. But those differences complemented each other when they let them. They performed at the charity event, and while it wasn't as dramatic as their first improvised duel, it was good. People enjoyed it. More importantly, Marcus and Eleanor enjoyed it. After that, they started meeting regularly to play together. Sometimes at the music studio, sometimes at Eleanor's beautiful home with its grand piano in the living room. They became friends, bonding over their shared love of music and their shared experience of having left music behind for other pursuits. Marcus started taking the keyboard out of his spare room and moving it to his living room. He played a little bit every day, even if just for 15 minutes. His skills slowly improved as muscle memory returned and new techniques developed. 3 months after the holiday party, Eleanor suggested something bold. "I want to start teaching again," she said. "Piano lessons for kids and adults. Would you be interested in teaching with me? We could rent a studio space together." Marcus was stunned. "I'm not qualified to teach. I'm not a professional." "Neither am I anymore," Eleanor pointed out. "But we both love music and we both know a lot about it. And more importantly, we both know what it's like to give up on music. We could help people avoid that mistake, or help them find their way back to it like we did." The idea was terrifying and exciting at the same time. Marcus had a stable job, a good salary. Teaching piano would be a risk. It might not work out. He might fail. But hadn't he already tried the safe path? Hadn't he already spent years doing the practical thing? And where had it gotten him? He was comfortable but not happy, secure but not fulfilled. "Let me think about it," he told Eleanor. He thought about it for 2 weeks. He made lists of pros and cons. He calculated finances. He talked to Sarah, who encouraged him enthusiastically. He even called his old piano teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who was retired now but still sharp as ever. She told him to go for it. Finally, Marcus made his decision. He would keep his job at Tech Vision but reduce his hours to part-time. He would use the extra time to teach piano with Eleanor. It wasn't all or nothing. It was a middle path, a way to have both the security he needed and the creativity he craved. Eleanor was thrilled when he told her. They found a small studio space to rent, just 2 rooms with pianos and some chairs. They called it Second Chance Music Studio. The name reflected both of their stories, getting a second chance to make music a real part of their lives. They started with just a few students. Some were children whose parents wanted them to learn piano. Others were adults who had always wanted to play but never had the chance. And a few, like Marcus and Eleanor themselves, were people who had studied music when they were younger and wanted to return to it. Marcus discovered that he loved teaching. There was something deeply satisfying about helping someone understand a difficult concept or master a challenging piece. He was patient and encouraging, remembering how scared he had felt as a student. Eleanor was wonderful with the students too. She had high standards but also genuine warmth. She pushed people to work hard but never made them feel bad about mistakes. Together they made a good team. 6 months after opening the studio, something unexpected happened. One of the videos from their holiday party performance was featured on a popular music blog. The writer called it one of the most joyful and spontaneous musical collaborations they had seen in years. The video went viral again, getting millions of views. News outlets wanted to interview them. Marcus and Eleanor were invited to perform on a local morning TV show. This time, Marcus said yes to the interviews. He talked openly about his choice to leave music behind and his journey back to it. He talked about the importance of pursuing creative passions even when they seemed impractical. Eleanor shared her story too. She talked about the sacrifices she had made for her family and how she didn't regret them, but also how important it was to find time for the things that fed your soul. Her honesty and grace inspired many people who saw the interviews. Their studio started getting more students. Some people signed up because they had seen the viral video and wanted to learn from those pianists from the holiday party. Others came because they resonated with Marcus and Eleanor's stories about second chances and rediscovering lost passions. A year after the holiday party, Marcus and Eleanor performed together at a real concert venue for the first time. It was a small theater, only 200 seats, but it was completely sold out. They played a mix of classical pieces, jazz standards, and improvisations. The audience loved it. After the performance, several people came up to them with tears in their eyes, saying that the concert had inspired them to reconnect with their own abandoned dreams, whatever those dreams were. A woman in her 50s said she was going to start painting again. A man in his 40s said he was going to try writing the novel he had always wanted to write. Marcus realized that their music wasn't just about the notes and rhythms. It was about the story behind it, the story of two people who had made practical choices and put their dreams aside, only to find their way back years later. That story resonated with people because so many of them had similar experiences. Eleanor seemed to understand this too. "We're not the best pianists in the world," she said to Marcus after the concert. "But maybe we're the right pianist to tell this particular story." Marcus thought about that simple conversation at the holiday party, when Eleanor had asked if she could play something. If he had said no, or if she had decided not to ask, none of this would have happened. The performance, the viral video, the teaching studio, the concert, all of it came from that one moment of spontaneous connection. It made him think about all the other moments like that in life, the small choices and random encounters that could change everything. How many opportunities did people miss because they were too scared or too practical or too stuck in their routines? Marcus made a promise to himself that he would try to say yes more often. Yes to opportunities that seemed scary. Yes to chances to create and connect. Yes to the things that made him feel alive, even when they didn't make perfect sense on paper. 2 years after the holiday party, Marcus left his job at TechVision completely. The teaching studio was doing well enough to support him, and he wanted to focus on it full-time. David Thompson, his former boss, was understanding. "I knew we were going to lose you eventually," he said with a smile. "After that performance, it was obvious where your heart really was." Eleanor expanded her own involvement with the studio too. Roberto, her husband, had retired from his CEO position, and they had more time together. He was proud of what she was doing and supported her completely. The studio moved to a larger space with 4 teaching rooms. Marcus and Eleanor hired 2 more teachers to help with the growing number of students. They started offering group classes and ensemble opportunities. They organized recitals where students could perform for each other and for family and friends. Marcus even started composing again. He wrote new pieces, simple ones at first, then more complex as his confidence grew. Some of his students learned to play his compositions. Hearing his music performed by other people was a thrill he had never experienced before. Eleanor performed occasionally at local events, always inviting Marcus to join her. They became known in the community as a duo, though they insisted they weren't really a formal partnership. They were just 2 friends who loved playing music together. One evening, 3 years after the holiday party, they sat together at the studio after all the students had gone home. They were drinking tea and talking about the upcoming recital they were planning. "Do you ever think about that night?" Marcus asked. "The holiday party?" Eleanor smiled. "All the time. It changed my life." "Mine too," Marcus said. I keep wondering what made you decide to walk up to the piano that night. What made you ask if you could play? Eleanor thought about it. I heard you playing that Beethoven piece, the Moonlight Sonata. You were playing it with real feeling, not just technically. I could tell you had a connection to music, that it meant something to you. And I felt this pull, this urge to play again. I hadn't felt that urge in so long. She paused, looking at the piano in the studio. I think part of me knew that if I didn't act on that urge right then, I might never do it. It felt like a now or never moment. Marcus nodded. I'm glad you took that chance. And I'm glad I didn't say no. Me too, Eleanor said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found their way back to music and, in the process, had found a deep friendship. The viral video still circulated online occasionally, popping up every few months when someone new discovered it. It always made Marcus smile to see the comments, people talking about how the video had inspired them or brought them joy. But the video itself wasn't the important thing. The important thing was what had come after. The reconnection with music. The teaching. The performances. The community they had built at the studio. The lives they had touched. Marcus thought about all the students they had taught. Some would go on to study music seriously. Others would just play for fun. But all of them, he hoped, would remember that it was never too late to start or to try again. That practical choices and creative passions didn't have to be mutually exclusive. That sometimes the best moments in life came from spontaneous decisions and unexpected connections. Years later, when people asked Marcus to tell the story of the piano duel at the holiday party, he always ended the same way. We were asked to play a simple tune, he would say, and we unleashed something neither of us expected, something that changed both of our lives forever. Eleanor would add with a knowing smile, the magic wasn't in the music itself. The magic was in remembering who we used to be and deciding we could be that person again, even after all those years.